So your client keeps asking for changes to your artwork. They keep changing their mind. How do you handle that? Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Tom Froese and you're watching the Making Friends vidcast. This is where I answer your questions about illustration. So normally that's what I do. I answer your questions about illustration, and that's what I'm going to do today. The last two episodes, however, I had to share with you guys an amazing conversation I had with an amazing illustrator, Magoz, and it was a super long conversation and I had to break it across two episodes because I didn't want to cut anything out. And if you're interested at all in the topic of traveling while illustrating, sort of being a digital nomad, I highly recommend you check out those podcasts. They're actually great for anyone who's just interested in the illustration process and some of the thinking that goes behind a different illustrator than myself. And he's an incredible award-winning illustrator, and I highly recommend you check them out. So if you're new to this vidcast, welcome. I'm very happy to have you watching. So what happens here is I answer your questions about illustration, but before I get into that, I always do some chit-chat at the beginning. If you want to jump right to the part where I'm answering questions, then you can just find a link in the show notes and you can jump right to it from that link. And I do that with every episode. But before I get into that, I like to just share sort of vlog style my thoughts and experiences from the week. And sometimes I have news. And really what I'm doing is I'm trying to create a video that's roughly, half an hour, 45 minutes long, something that I believe most illustrators or people listening to this, you don't have to be an illustrator, will actually just listen to in the background while they're drawing or doing other things. And it's sort of like a mix between a vlog and a podcast, and that's why I call it a vidcast. And yeah, I'm making basically the kind of material that I would want to listen to myself. And that's why I like to share sort of personal anecdotes and experiences, and then also answer your questions where I interact with the audience, you guys. And it's sort of a collaboration in that way. So anyway, thanks for watching. Let's jump into the chit chat. I have been in what I'll call a creative crisis, maybe a creative drought, something like that, for almost the entire calendar year so far. And I could feel it coming. When you know you're about to be sick and you can just feel it coming? Well, I could feel it coming at the end of last year. It was an amazing year, like my best year ever. And maybe I was being a bit pessimistic, but I could feel that 2018 was going to be a challenging year. And I didn't know in which way, but I had a sense that it would be hard motivationally. And I was right about that. This year, I have been privileged enough to get tons and tons of work requests, more than I can handle. I've turned down probably as many jobs as I've taken on. And that's partly because I'm picking and choosing my work a little more selectively, but also I'm just getting a lot more requests. At the same time, I am taking a lot more requests on at a time. And this kind of maxed out or peaked in, let's say, March. Around that time, I had about 14 jobs on the go, and I think I was getting a little ahead of myself, perhaps a bit less than humble in my abilities to manage that many jobs, and I sort of just burned out. And what happened was I wasn't excited about any of the work because I couldn't focus in on any of it. And for me, I really love to just dive deep into a job and get into that world and focus, like totally tunnel vision, just get into this one thing. That's when I do my best work. And it's really hard to just shift modes and do that split between 14 jobs. So yeah, I think that what started happening, aside from it not being a very enjoyable creative process and not feeling that inspired, I was also starting to take my clients for granted, feeling like, I'm getting all these jobs. Why should I don't need to be as careful with the client. I don't need to be as warm or whatever it was. Like, I mean, part of it's just a time thing. I don't have time even now to craft every email perfectly. So I would just kind of put my reaction down in the email, send it, and try and be a lot more efficient that way. But what started happening was I just wasn't answering emails at all within a day, 2 days, sometimes within a week. And in my own experience, when people have taken that long, especially if I'm a paying customer, if they've taken that long to answer my emails, I start to wonder about whether they value me. And it's just outright, it just doesn't make you feel very good. So I this is a funny story. So in the evenings I'll flick through YouTube and kind of just wind down by watching whatever. It's very random, but I randomly stumbled upon Gordon Ramsay's Hotel Hell, and that's like a weird reality TV show where he goes in to these very poorly managed hotels and he kind of whips them into shape, and he often encounters these very eccentric hotel managers, owners, operators, who it turns out they have their head in the clouds, and they really, maybe they have their heads up their butts. They just have no clue about how badly they're operating their hotel, how poorly they treat their staff and their guests. And he goes in there and he just really, I mean, Gordon Ramsay is known for his fiery temper, and he just like, he's like a drill sergeant or something like that, and he just sort of rips into them. And a lot of the times the hotel managers or owners are so proud that they can't see that this professional, amazing um, Gordon Ramsay, he's there to help, and he might not go about it the right way, but he's there, and he has all this expertise. He's Gordon Ramsay, and these people won't take his advice. They're so proud and so stuck in their own ways. And in this one episode I was watching, there is this owner operator, and he was just so pretentious, and what else is the word? Like, he just thought he was a prince or a king, and he acted like that and very entitled. And he was so self-serving and narcissistic that he had no idea how badly he was treating his staff, and how poor the guests experience at his hotel were. So when I was watching this, I started feeling really gross, and partly it was because I was like disgusted with this character, this owner. But I also had the sense that like there's something in this owner that I feel is inside of me. And I started kind of feeling like, I'm I think I've lost touch with my customer. I've lost touch with how to treat them well. And in my own work, I've been treating it as though it's purely my art. And because of the privilege that I enjoy of people coming to me, and like I have a high demand for my work, I sort of just started taking that for granted, and kind of, it may not have been externalized as much as I feel it was, but definitely my attitude was there of like, I'm entitled to take as long as I want with these emails, and to really lower my standards in terms of customer service. And I watched a few of these episodes. I kind of got obsessed for a few nights and just watched Gordon Ramsay rip into these dumb hotel managers who just had no clue about how eccentric they were. And I guess I was just like, what can I learn from this? What if I'm being that kind of person? And so I actually did learn a lot. Gordon Ramsay is very controversial in the way he's kind of mean. He's actually very mean and uses a lot of expletives, and it's a reality TV, so it's all dramatic on purpose. But still, I was like, okay, yeah, I need to be whipped into shape. And there was this one client I have right now that this specifically applies to, They contacted me back early in the year. They wanted me to do some illustrations of these, some of their products. I can share more about this another time, I suppose. But big project, probably 10 or 12 large pieces that I have to illustrate. And after about 6 of them, I really started losing steam, and I had about 4 or 6 more to go, and I would just sort of wait until the deadline that we had set for it, and then I'd sort of be like, oh, you know what, I didn't get anywhere on this. I'm going to need more time, and 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 this is totally unacceptable from a customer service standpoint to show up on the last day of a deadline and say that I haven't done the work. Like that's like something you learn what not to do in elementary school. And here I am doing this to a paying customer for a large project. And the sort of the way I justified doing it was really that there was no deadline for this. We just made up these deadlines so we could work towards something. And this is true. This isn't tied to a campaign or anything. This is a project that's totally internal to this company. It's just art that they're going to put up on their wall. So there is no real deadline. So I was treating it much more like I'm some kind of famous painter and I'll take the time that I need to get it done. And so, there are some parts that I'm leaving out. I had 14 jobs on the go, and this was the one without actual deadlines. So of course, if there's one project that I can shift around a little bit, I'll try and take advantage of that as much as possible. But that being said, I was terrible at communicating about this with this client, and when I realized what I was doing, I I emailed the client and I explained, and I even sent a bouquet to them. A bouquet is something I can do here in Vancouver. It's sort of like a gift basket when you put beer in it and chocolate, and the company sends it to the office or wherever your recipient is. And I sent that last week as a sort of gesture to say, like, I've been sucking at this, and here's an explanation, but it's not an excuse. I just want to let you know that I'm recommitting myself to upping my game here, and I'm super sorry. So this is a case where I had to just call myself on being substandard in my customer service abilities, and I had to own up to it and be responsible. And especially with this one client that was really receiving the brunt of it, I kind of acknowledged it, even though they never complained. I feel like I could have just kept doing what I did and eventually finish the work and get paid, and they probably wouldn't have minded. Oh, they must have minded, but maybe they just expected that since they'd never worked with me before, maybe they thought that's just how I worked, and I was a bit of a rock star in that way or something like that. Anyway, all that to say, my own ideal take on things like this is like, once you see a fault in yourself, you need to own up to it and be responsible for it. And that's at the cost of my ego. That's at the cost of being right, or even being paid in some cases. But when I did that, it was both humbling. When I sort of owned up and wrote this email to him and sent the bouquet, it was humbling, but it was also freeing, because when you step back on a path that you should be on, when your expectations of yourself line back up with your actions, there's a sense of coming back home. There's a sense of becoming your true self again. And there's nothing freer than doing what you know is right at the expense of doing what's comfortable. And so I've always kind of had a strong conscience like that, much to my chagrin sometimes. But anyway, I sort of let myself drift away from being not just an illustrator, but someone who serves his customers and honors them for coming to me. When customers come to me because they want me to make art for them, and that's an honor, and it's always an honor. And I haven't always been a person in this position. I need to make sure that I don't take it for granted. and that I honor the people who come to me to do work for them. But I was saying part of my creative crisis that I was having, obviously the customer service aspect is related to it, but there's also a bigger picture under which the customer service thing sits, and that's an overall sense of goallessness. So, I've been illustrating 5 or 6 years now, and I've achieved a lot of the goals that I set for myself, and I've exceeded some of my own expectations. So, I've done a kids book, I've done tons of illustration for editorial clients, and, I feel like in many different respects, even including like how much I'm able to earn every year, like I feel like I've kind of met all these goals, and I'm the kind of person who, once I meet a goal, the novelty wears off, and I I want something new to do, some other new thing to accomplish. And right now, I've kind of lost sight of what else is there to do, which is a little bit narrow-minded because there's never a ceiling on this. But that's kind of a big part of it. Is I've lost a sense of goals, a sense of where is this heading now? So I do have some hard work to do in terms of defining what my new goals are and then working toward them. But the customer service part kind of fits in here because um, that has always been in the past a huge part of my goal is working with the customer to solve their business problem. I don't create art that's for its own sake. It always solves a problem. And when I really get into a project, that's the part that I enjoy the most, is just trying to figure out what that solution is, and that sort of exploration. And before I even start sketching in earnest, getting just getting into the project and getting my mind into it, finding a way to think of the problem in the most unique and interesting way as possible. Like that's really, I feel, is the soul of what I do. Even on my about page on my website, I have in my bio, I aim to create work that's beautiful, original, alive. And all of this happens when I put my mind to the job as if it were my own, to make truly unique work for my client, and that's tailored to their needs. So illustration is alive when it's actually living in the real world and addressing a real need, and is interesting and engaging for people who view it. And that's apart from style or whimsy or anything like that I also enjoy putting into my work. But yeah, I feel like that sense of customer service, I'm not sure if I'm being super clear here, but that sense of customer service, in the sense that you're working with them, I'm working with them to create something that's totally unique to them, and that I've considered their what they need in a very specific way. That is so much a part of what makes each job interesting. And so if I can remember to reconnect with a client and not to put myself in a place of kind of isolate myself as a so-called artist, where I don't take direction from clients, or I don't take their needs as much into consideration as I should. I need to do that more. I need to take their needs into consideration more, and that will motivate me to make better work. If I can connect with the client, if I can like them more, if I can um, sort of empathize with them more, I will be more driven to make work that I would want to see out in the world. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm leaving out some details, and this isn't black and white. Like, I haven't been totally bad at work, and I haven't totally given up, but these are definitely things that I've been struggling with along the way in the last few months. And it's always nice to have a revelation, even if it comes in the form of a reality TV star yelling at hotel managers. So that's really something I've been thinking about a lot this week. Okay, now it's time to answer your questions. So I have a few questions that I'd like to try to answer today, but I might only get through one because they're all so beefy, and I could just spend an entire episode just doing one. I could spend multiple episodes doing any one of these questions. So this question comes from Daniella in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And she asks, I wanted to ask you about revision stages when doing commissioned work because I'm new as and don't know how to approach it. Maybe it's just the clients I've been having that are as inexperienced in working with illustrators as I am in illustrating, but they start with a brief, and then even while trying to understand what they want, they start changing the concept. As soon as I hand out a first rough sketch, they start making changes, and there's key information about the commission that they don't give me until I'm almost finished, and it just makes the whole process very stressful. So Daniella, I totally hear you. I totally feel you on this, and this is a topic that's very near and dear to me, and that is, how to manage a project and how to make sure that it doesn't get out of control. So you want to build into your project, in that, by that I mean into your brief and your quote, what's included in what you're doing for your client, for the amount of money and all that. You want to build into that as much as possible of what you will do for how much money. So that means you create a scope. In business, we call this scope. So like what's included in a project. So let's just say one illustration of a runner in an urban environment that needs to be 8 by 10 inches and used in a print ad and also on a website. So you really want to include what you're making, and then needs to be done by such and such deadline. You have 2 weeks to work on it, and it's going to cost the client however much you charge for it. So all of this needs to be outlined in the initial brief before you even set a dollar amount on it. You will price your work based on what the client's asking you to do, and that's all outlined here in the scope. Along the way, down, like when you get into sketches and then creating the color final art, if the client starts saying, well, I want to have 3 runners in it now, or I need 2 images at the same size, can you just throw that in? Or I'm changing my mind on this concept at the once you've already shown them full color final art. That's called scope creep, because you agreed early on what you would do for the fee and how long it would take you and how much time you needed to turn these things around. You agreed to that, and now the client's adding to your load. They have other clients, you have other clients. It's stressful. Of course it's stressful if new things that you weren't expecting, like big things like this that you could have figured out early on but didn't. It's stressful to add more work when you already have other things going on in your life. So while in every job unexpected things do happen and you do end up spending late nights anyway because, the idea didn't come right away, or, something in life came up. Those things do come, but you still need to, as much as possible, clearly define what you are making, why, and for how much, and in how much time. And actually, because life happens and unexpected things do happen between this job and other jobs you have and your personal life, it's all the more important to make sure you build those things into your agreement with the client. So when I work with a client, I basically have, let's say, four different stages. The first stage is write the brief, right? And by brief, I'm going to mean the thing that we agree that I'm doing, and that includes the quote and like how much I'll do it for and the agreement and all that kind of stuff. So define the brief. Then you go into sketches, right? As far as the client sees, the next thing they're going to see is sketches. And then after sketches, they approve on the sketch, you create final art based on those approved sketches. And then once the client approves of the final art, you deliver the final files. So brief, sketches, final art, deliver files. So I've already talked about brief. The next thing is, well, you need to define. So in the brief, you need to define those other things. So sketches, what can the client expect from those sketches, and how many times can they expect to ask for a revision or a change to those sketches? Okay. And in my case, I always actually include in the sketch, in my brief, I even include like how many sketches and different concepts I'll include in my job. So I often will include 3 different sketches. It's 3 different concepts for a given illustration that I'm supposed to do. So the client can choose between one of those things. And it gives me a chance to, see the problem from different angles. And then once the client chooses a sketch, then I will give them 3 changes to that sketch. And this is where we work out content and tone. And it's all basically in pencil, black and white. It's all rough. But I include in my projects 3 changes to those sketches. Once the client approves of a sketch, it's time to move it into final art. Once the client has approved of it, I'm confident to move it into final art and start spending all that time fleshing it out. So adding, color and doing whatever I need to do to make that illustration look legit and final and amazing. When I give the client the first version of the final art, they can approve it or they can ask for changes. And I include up to 3 changes on the final art. And those changes at this point cannot be like, oh, well, I changed my mind. I don't want it to be a runner in an urban environment. I want it to be a passenger on a train now in a countryside. Like you can't once you're in the final art stage totally change what the illustration was about. At this point, it's more like, okay, the colors are a little bit off. Can we change the colors? Or, I find that the smile on the face isn't quite the tone I'm looking for. Can we change the expression of the face? Those might be annoying things to get feedback on, but they're small and easy enough to do in the final artwork. I think what you want to avoid is having the client make changes that are changing the structure, the underlying structure of the artwork or the message, certainly the message in the artwork. You don't want to change those things. Those are things you work out in the sketches. The important thing here is not just what's allowed in the revisions, but how many revisions are included for the fees. You have to put a limit on it because if you don't, they could go on forever. It gives some motivation to the client to make up their mind early in the process, or it will cost them money. So once a client wants to do a 4th revision, you can check back and say, okay, I'm happy to keep going with these changes, but please remember that according to our brief, according to the terms that we agreed on, I will be charging you additional fees for these changes. And what those fees are, you can negotiate with the client. Maybe it's your hourly rate or a fixed fee per revision. But suddenly the client can't be so free to ask for changes because they know it's going to cost them. And I think that's so important for anyone in the creative industry to include in their brief. And it is something that takes some time and experience to get better at, but include that in your brief. Include how many changes a client is allowed to do, and have an open conversation with your client about that before you get into it. And they'll ask things like, well, what if how many changes can I get in the sketches? What if I want to change my mind? Well, that costs me money. And you can work that out right at the beginning. But don't get yourself into a case where you're just at the, beck and call of your client. Every time they have a change, you have to do it, and you have to do it all within this fee that you agreed on a long time ago. That's now totally irrelevant. The scope has been creeped, and you feel lost. The client has lost trust in you, and you've lost motivation. That's not a good thing. Having a scope, a clearly defined scope in the brief, and sticking to it will be better for the creative process for everybody and help you create work on time. And everybody involved is going to be a lot happier. Okay, so that was the first part of Daniella's question. And she has a second part to her question that I think is equally important. And it's really about how to receive feedback from the client in terms of, where should they write it down and how do you keep track of it? In Daniella's case, she was saying that her clients sometimes ask her for her WhatsApp information and, constantly leaving her voice messages. And she feels like it's pretty invasive. And then she also says that when she gets feedback in email, the email chains kind of get out of hand and hard to keep track of. And this is something, again, that I build in to the scope. I put in my terms and conditions, I say the client is responsible to send revisions back in one document. For each revision, the client has to go however many people are behind in their organization. So maybe it's like the art director and then their creative director, but the CEO is chiming in, and then they have a kind of board of directors. I don't want to be privy to all the conversation that happens among those people in their office. I just want to know what changes I need to make as an illustrator. And so I always ask that feedback be sent in a consolidated document. So all the feedback has to come through one person in one document and clearly tell me what I'm to do next. You may have different ways of receiving feedback that you prefer. I prefer to receive my feedback in an email or a Google document or a Word document. And that's just a nice, easy way that the client can use. The client usually has those tools available, and then it's just all in one place. Yes, email chains of feedback can get very confusing and long, and that might just be part of it. But if you can coach the client into sending feedback, not piecemeal or ad hoc, but one time as much as possible, just like for each sketch you give them that they ask for changes, have them create all their feedback in one place and give it to you. And yes, sometimes the client will think of something afterward and add it, but at least they're trying now, right? And that is the best way to make sure that you get feedback all in one place, and that you're able to keep track of it, and that you're able to implement it, thus pleasing your client. So the client will trust you more because you're able to actually implement their feedback because you were able to keep track of it because it was all in one place. So yeah, I think there's a single theme running through my answer here, and that's write it into the brief, write it into the quote. Make sure that you have a clearly defined scope, and that way you'll know when the client is asking for anything that's outside of that scope, in which case you don't have to get mad. You just need to charge them more or point the client back to the brief and say, this isn't in the brief. Can we kind of keep on track? And then you, of course, need to rely on your people skills as to how to confront or explain to the client those kinds of things. I just wanted to add one little important piece of this answer. I did say there are 4 steps to a project, which is the brief, the sketches, the final art, and then final delivery of file. And I think it's actually really important to define what I mean by delivery of final file. So in any project, I will not release to the client my final files until they've signed off and I have some guarantee that they will not be making any more changes. Because what you don't want to do is go through the final stages of cleaning up your Illustrator or Photoshop file and then uploading it to WeTransfer or Dropbox or however you deliver your files, especially if they're big and take a long time to upload. You don't want to go through all that only to have them say, oh, we just need to make this other change. And then you have to do that whole process over again. And it's redundant, and in the least sense, it's annoying. But at worst, it's taking up a lot more time than you bargained for or planned for at this stage. Make sure that the client has signed off on the file, on the artwork, before you send them the final file. And all of this might beg the question, what are you showing the client? How are you showing the client sketches and final art along the way before you actually give them the actual artwork? What does it look like when you show a client these steps in order to approve them? And that is the subject for a different episode. If you guys are interested in knowing that, let me know, and maybe that will be the subject of one of my upcoming videos. Okay, so I think that's a beefy enough question to answer today. I would just like to say that since I started posting these videos, I've been getting emails and comments from you guys that are really encouraging. You guys have been thanking me for the videos. You guys have been telling me that the videos are meaningful and helpful to you. And I just want to let you all know, even if I haven't been able to respond directly to you guys, I really appreciate your feedback, even if it's critical. But especially when you guys tell me that you're appreciating the content I'm making, it really warms my heart and encourages me and makes me know that I'm making useful content, that I'm spending my time well here and helping you people. So thank you so much for all your positive remarks and encouragements. All right, guys. Well, that's a wrap for today. I got through one question, and I think that subject of managing client revisions and all that is super important. I hope you got a lot from it. Let me know if you have any more questions about that. And of course, any questions you have about illustration, you can leave your questions in the comments here, and that's the best way for me to get at them. My name's Tom Froese. I'm an illustrator and designer in Vancouver, British Columbia. You can find all my work and social links and all that in the comments below. My website is tomfroese.com. If you like this video, please hit that like button. If you like this channel and you want to know when I drop a new video, hit the subscribe button and then that little bell. Ring that bell, and that's the best way just to know, especially as I start producing some more spontaneous, not on Monday videos like I did this week. I did a smaller video about Client from Hell, small anecdote. If you want to check that out, that was the most recent video I did before this one. And anyway, hope you guys have a great week. Keep making great work and asking great questions. I'll see you next week. Bye.